Episode of Mr. Allard's Neighborhood. This is the place where you're entitled to Brad's opinion. And now for your host, Brad Allard.
Well, nice, pretty sunny day. A little cooler than yesterday, of course, but it's a nice day here in the neighborhood. I hope it's nice where you're at, wherever you listen on the World Wide Web. Taylor, I was checking out the stats, the data about the show. Apparently there's some people in Japan that are listening to me, and I'm like, what in the world? They got to, listen to Japan? Hear me talk about school board or whatever. Yeah, and some
worldwide.
and some from Australia. And I'm like, wow. No, we're not talking about dozens and dozens, but there were some hits on it. They show me every month on our Libsyn platform provider, and it's like, wow, a big shot. See, anyway. So, what are you doing this weekend, Taylor?
Working.
As always, a couple things I want to point out. On Saturday over at Pathway, starting at 10 o'clock to 3 o'clock, Gabrina and her crew over at the Chamber of Commerce have a business expo, which my networking group will be a part of, the BNI group I'm in. So come by and say hey, and we'll hit you up for coming to our visitors meeting, which is on the last Wednesday in March. But we're also going to have several of our friends there that are going to be with their own tables. So come by the Business Expo. It's like I said, Pathway starts at 10, ends at 3 o'clock. Gabrina would be glad to see you there because she does such a great job. She wanted to be here today, but she had some business to take care of with this thing because it's very, very busy, of course. Also, Taylor, have you heard this movie, Jesus Revolution?
I have not.
Okay. It's a movie that would definitely appeal to people my age. What it's about is the late 60s and early 70s religious revival, if you will, of many, many hippies, which is a term I'll just throw out there. Many of the young people of this country, remember, people from 18 to 24 or something, that group. And it was interesting because I was a little kid when this was going on, and I kind of barely remember it. I remember some of the older kids in church that were embracing it, but I was just about 10, 11, 12 years old. But I lived with the aftermath, absolutely, because it completely changed Christian music. I mean, most of your modern Christian music started in this era prior to, say, Larry Norman, Randy Stonehill, Daniel Amos, which is a group, not a person, all these other more contemporary Christian bands back in early 70s. There was nothing. I mean, you didn't have anything that remotely resembles KLTY or any of these other stations. The idea of drums and guitars and Christian music was seen as, just inappropriate, at least, certainly within the churches. But within a decade, you had youth groups and youth choirs and churches singing more contemporary Christian type music that actually had a beat to it, and all this other business. So it's really it's going to be an interesting movie. I'm going to see it with a old high school, college, longtime friend of mine. We get together quite often, and we both experienced this. So I'm hoping it'll be a good movie. Kelsey Grammer is in it. You know him from Frasier and other shows. Anyway, before we get into the Ukraine business, let's talk about the sponsors. Thank you, Daniel. CrossFit Burleson, 317 Southwest Wilshire, at www.crossfitburleson.com. You can find out about all the plans they have, all the regimens, the training, whatnot. They have supervision. They have hours during the day for classes and such. So you can check on their webpage for that and see if you want to join a class with professional training and whatnot. It's not just something you just wander in and start lifting. You're going to actually have a program to follow, and you're going to have supervision. So CrossFit Burleson, 317 Southwest Wilshire. Also, thank you, Shandy Stoggs Deal Group with the Real Estate Group. I read yesterday that home market, the home sales are declining in a lot of areas, not in Texas, not in DFW in particular. So it's still a very strong market. I was talking about this with her just 3 or 4 days ago because of somebody maybe wanting to use a service, and it's still a very strong market here, and the rates are coming down a little bit. But anyway, also, as you know, that she's running for place for the school board here at BISD, as is Dallas Owen, who is my guest last Tuesday. So if you're interested in hearing what the two ladies have had to say, check out the podcast. The current one from Dallas is up today. If you want to hear Shandy's, it's about 10 days old and it's in the archives, which is easy to find. So check out what they have to say. Also, thank you to our place, of course, Otto. Hope you're doing well. Hope everything is, just smooth running over at the restaurant. It's a great place to go and have lunch or breakfast. It's a great place to meet people, do business. I do my business there, my networking group. We have our meetings there sometimes, or at least our individual meetings. Also, it's a great place just to relax and drink a little coffee and sit on the patio and chit chat with the waiter and with the neighbors. Also, thank you to Chris. Same place, same type of place. You can go and visit your friends and neighbors there for have a cigar, have a smoke over at the Standard. It's a really comfortable place. It's not loud. It's not boisterous. It's not a frat boy Yahoo bar. It's where adults do business. And so if you're not much of a cigar smoker, they can help you out because they got trained tobacconists there, and they have all specials all the time. It seems like, I mean, every time I pull up their page on Facebook to have today's drink and cigar specials. Also, thank you to Tiffany, who also is at the Standard. Local Life magazine is coming out next week. It's always great. It's a very hometown appealing magazine. It has 30,000 recipients plus with over 110,000 readers. Plus, I see them in local businesses just on the counter or something like that. So you don't know how many people who are waiting for their car to be fixed on or waiting for their turn at the hair salon to read through that. So you're getting a lot of coverage with Tiffany's magazine. So check it out. Also, thank you to Gala at Southern Gym up also at the Standard on the third floor. They have repairs, they have designs, they have good inventory. I was talking to her yesterday. She's a member of our networking group, and their tentative date is mid-April for the opening of that bottom floor. Just there's a lot of details to be taken care of, but they're looking at mid-April for the grand opening there at the bottom. Also, come on, here's the next one. There it is. HotWorks. Also, HotWorks. It's an infrared workout system. It's a different kind of workout. It's not lifting weights and whatnot. It's got 11 different programs, from hot blast to cardio to Pilates to yoga is a very popular one. Also, rowing, the whole 9 yards. So you have 11 different types of workouts. Also, you get some instruction, you get some supervision there. Michelle Humphreys there. I really enjoy talking with her because she's just very bright and knowledgeable about not just this, but a lot of things actually. And so, there you go. It's worth checking it out if you're looking for that different type of workout. Also, Melissa Harmon, my real estate agent, not my real estate agent. What did I just say? My insurance agent. I've got too many things. Got people buzzing me right now on the phone. Sorry, Melissa. My Texas Farm Bureau agent, 682-804-0534. That's 682-804-0534. She could check out your insurance and make sure you're getting the best deal, the best coverage, the best cost, best, deductible from your car insurance, on and on and on. We gave her our insurance information, and she was able to not only to save us some money, but also upgrade some of our insurance. So she could do the same for you. I don't believe you have any nonprofits there. I just remind you about the expo thing, and I hope I remember at the end of the show that's going to be a lot of fun. Cabrina does great work. So there you are. Anyway, on a less happy topic, we're going to talk about Ukraine a year into the war. The Ukraine war is much worse, much more savage than what you see in the news. What I read today and yesterday, the day before, in preparation for the show, it just astounding, the cruelty of the Russians towards Ukraine people. Russia does not consider the Ukrainians as a separate racial group, nor Ukraine as a separate country. That being said, they look at people who claim to be different, claim to be ethnic Ukrainians as opposed to ethnic Russians, as race traitors, and they treat them as such. And the brutality of how they're treating these Ukrainian people it reminds me very much of the days of World War II in that region of the world between the Nazis and Stalin's forces. They did pretty much the same thing. If you have a fair grounding in World War II history, like I like to think I do, You could see the parallels very, very clearly. The use of propaganda, the use of torture, the use of violence, the use of indiscriminate bombing. There's an article that really I had to read it a couple times because I couldn't really believe that this is going on. But this is from the National Review. This is, I believe, yesterday's article. The author is named Mitzi Perdue, and it talks about Russian landmines disguised as toys target the children of Ukraine. Russian landmines disguised as toys target the children of Ukraine. What? And they would show pictures. I didn't have pictures in my printout, but they would show pictures of like what looked like teddy bears or something like that. And the kid would pick it up, and it's not designed to kill the child. It's designed to maim the child, which is even crueler. Why? Because if you maim one of these children, somebody's going to have to take care of that child, and it takes somebody off the front line. The Russians think it absorbs resources that could be used to fight against them. So they're not really intended to kill the children. They're intended to permanently cripple them for life, to drain resources and personnel, man and woman power, away from the fight because they have to take care of these children. I can't think of anything more cruel than that. And even I had to read this one twice. They have created some of these low intensity landmines to look like fallen leaves from trees. And they put them amongst other, real leaves from that have fallen from the tree. And so as a kid just is walking through a patch of leaves on a sidewalk or playground or anywhere else, and he steps on one of these fake leaves, it's enough to take his foot off. All right. And that child now is permanently disabled and is going to be the responsibility of maybe somebody that's on the front line, or it takes up space from in the medical field or medical provision, because this child needs medical care. That's medical care that may not go to a frontline fighter. It's unbelievably barbaric. Furthermore, many of these Russian soldiers they're not really even soldiers. They are hardened criminals that have been promised pardons if they fight for the Russians. There's a mercenary group, I'll call them that, called the Wagner Group, led by one of the Russian generals. And most of them are made up of these criminals, lifelong criminals. And so they're not operating as soldiers. They're operating as gangsters and thieves. They're not operating as a well-formed, disciplined military. They're bandits and murderers. And they're going in there and just destroying neighborhoods just for the sake of it. I have another article that if you have access to, I would highly recommend. It's in the Atlantic, written by Ann Applebaum. This is about 3 days ago. It talks about Biden's trip to Kyiv, which I will address in a few minutes. And it talks about what the importance of that signal was of our support. But it also goes on and talks about in these articles about how these Russian soldiers, if you want to call them that, are entering into Ukrainian villages or small towns or larger towns with a hit list, literally, of people that they are supposed to capture and, if not kill, torture and hold. And on this hit list would be political leaders, religious leaders, unless they're Russian Orthodox, but if they're like Ukrainian Orthodox or other non-Russian church, then they're supposed to be taken out. Members of the educational leadership, they're all taken to, basically torture chambers and dungeons. There's three examples of one of the articles I read talking about the mayors of these communities that have been completely that they'd be taken and so beaten so thoroughly that they basically are not functional anymore. Also, they talked about another group that they target are these nonprofits, these nonprofit charities. These Russian soldiers have no concept of altruistic efforts. They have no concept of the notion of charity and doing something for others because that's the right thing to do. Many of these leaders of these nonprofits have been taken captive and beaten and electroshocked and starved and water boarded and all this other stuff because they think there has to be a reason why that these people are helping others without anything in return. And they're totally mystified by these charitable nonprofits because they didn't exist in their society. In Russian society, they don't have these kind of nonprofits like we here in Burleson are so blessed with. There's other examples as well, talking about teachers that have been pointed out by Russian soldiers as potential troublemakers. I guarantee you I'd be dragged off. They talk about people that run the utilities in these towns being taken off to camps and torture chambers. And why? Because they're trying to totally destroy the Ukrainian society. They don't think it should or will exist. Also, we talk about the devastation left behind. They absolutely destroy the community for no real purpose. I mean, they're just randomly destroying Ukrainian cities and towns just in a destructive mode. Furthermore, they booby trap a lot of these homes that have been taken over, and once they leave or been forced out and the residents return to their homes, they find their refrigerator or their microwave or their washing machine has been rigged to blow when they open it up, and it may kill them or may maim them. It's all the same to them. So they're booby trapping the homes that people are returning to once these Ukrainian forces regain the ground. Some of the Russian soldiers who have been captured talk about they don't even know why they're there. They didn't even know they were in Ukraine. They were told in some cases that they were fighting in Russia itself against Ukrainian invasion. And when they were captured, they found out they were actually in Ukraine and not in Russia. They were highly surprised. They had no idea. They thought they were told that they were fighting a Ukrainian invasion into their homeland instead of the other way around. They also were told that Russian-speaking citizens or ethnic Russians in Ukraine were being tortured and beaten and whatever else, which is exactly out of the page of Nazi Germany, where Hitler and the Nazis were portraying German-speaking people in Poland and Czechoslovakia and others being massacred and brutally beaten and all this other business, which obviously is not true, as we know. And this is not true either. But they're talking about how even the Ukrainians that consider themselves Ukrainian, but they were ethnic Russian, maybe their parents were, maybe they were born in Russia and they moved to Ukraine. They're trying to, get these guys to understand what's going on, and they don't believe it because they've been so indoctrinated with this propaganda. So far, all this has led to 200,000 casualties for the Russian soldiers, including 60,000 dead, 60,000 in 1 year. That's more than we lost in Vietnam. That's 4 times as many as they lost in 10 years when they were in Afghanistan. They've already lost 60,000 men. Desertion rates are high. The equipment's total crap. Most Russian soldiers, they claim the reason why they have to forage is because they're not adequately fed or clothed. And that part is true. It really strikes me what this war is doing to the Russian people itself. 370,000 Russians have left because of what their country is doing. The draft avoidance is well over half. But Putin is going to fight this war to the end. I was listening to a radio commentator last night, and his point was that had Joe Biden not shown such weakness in Afghanistan, Putin would not have invaded Ukraine. All I always say about that is maybe this was the final catalyst at best, but this has been a long-term goal of Vladimir Putin since the fall of the Soviet Union. Russia has always been expansionist, whatever name you want to put it under. Putin, the czars, Lenin, Stalin, etc. This is a national characteristic that goes back centuries. They do not think Ukraine is a legitimate country. They think it's an artificial country created by the West for the sole purpose of trying to hurt Russia. They have an extremely paranoid view of the West, and they have had, this predates Putin, this predates This predates even Stalin and Lenin. All right? They've always viewed Europe as hostile. And so, is Mr. Biden responsible for this? I think stretch a little bit. If you listen to my show even a little bit when I talk about Mr. Biden, I hope you know where I feel bad. I feel about Mr. Biden. I'm not a fan even a little bit. I have a lot of problems with his economic policies. I have even more problems with his social policies. And probably in the next open show I want to talk about something called DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how he's imposing that on the country. But that's a later show. But this is one area I do agree with Mr. Biden, and that is our support of Ukraine. I do agree with him on this. Now, has he done everything I think he should have? My problem with his support of Ukraine isn't the fact of it, is just how they dribble it out little by little. And they're always afraid of if this one bit extra support is going to provoke Mr. Putin. Mr. Putin's already provoked. He's not, he came into this provoked. The idea that we should tailor our response to this to his delusional, maniacal craziness, his in complete cruelty, that we should respond to that in a way that the Europeans did to the Nazis back in the 30s. Putin doesn't drive our foreign policy. This idea that if we give him tanks, he's going to escalate. If we give him the Ukraine people this or that or the other, they'll escalate. They're already escalating, and they would have escalated anyway. What the Ukraine fight resembles to me historically is what happened right at the beginning of World War II when Russia tried to invade Finland, and try as they might, they couldn't defeat the Finns. Okay, it also reminds me of World War I when the Germans tried to invade Belgium, and they held out longer than they wanted, and Belgium paid a severe price. But it really does remind me of those episodes where they were expecting to be welcomed into their society, and they were not. And they figured we'll take a month at best to defeat this minor country, and it did not happen. This is what's happening now. After the initial push, Ukraine has regained much of its territory. To me, this will be one of the worst decisions a country ever made in relation to foreign policy. Putin is on the verge of destroying his own country because of his mania. Furthermore, we talk about economic sanctions, whatever. The reason they don't work as well as we wish they would is because oil is such a valuable commodity that a lot of countries have said, well, we're with you in spirit, but we need the oil kind of attitude. Plus, they do have China on their side. I'm going to address that in a minute, too. But the point is that, are we doing the right thing in Ukraine by our support? My answer is yes. Now, other people have reservations about it. I would address those reservations by the fact, again, that our reluctance to help isn't going to make any appreciable difference in Putin or the Russians' behavior. If we say, okay, we're not going to do this anymore, it doesn't mean the Russians are going to start treating Ukraine humanely, and that Putin is going to retreat from this war. Far from it. And people say, well, God willing, if it's God's will, what if Putin is overthrown or he dies? He'll probably be replaced with somebody just like him. Okay, this is the very small leadership's small group of leadership's mindset. The only way that the Russian government's going to change is that the people below change it, not the people at the top. Anyway, that being said, we are not provoking this war. The propaganda that's being shown in this war is that we are invading their country. We have no intention of invading Russia. No matter what we say, though, that's what they're being told in Russia. A lot of people have concerns about the expense that we are put forth towards this. As of so far, we've spent over $100 billion in aid. A couple things I'd say about that. both economic and humanitarian. Let's go with the humanitarian first. You can't watch what's going on in Ukraine and say that's not our problem. Some people can, but as a nation, we can't do that. And still call ourselves a leader of the democratic world. We have a democracy, flaws and all, in Ukraine, and there's a lot of flaws in the Ukrainian government. It's known for being inept and a bit corrupt, a lot of corrupt, and hopefully this will change some of that. And Zelensky, by the way, this week has replaced many of his top ministers for incompetence or corruption. But the point is, you can't watch this stuff on the news, or you can't read about it and say, and it's not our problem, because it is. Because what'll happen next? What's going to happen when Russia, who also has the same opinion of the validity of Latvia, Estonia, Moldova, Lithuania, Georgia, Kazakhstan, all these other nations that are around it, they have the same opinion. They're not legitimate. That's Russian territory. There's Russian people in it. We're going to come get it. The Ukraine would not have resolved, even if we said, okay, go ahead and take over the Ukraine, that would not have resolved a thing, because it'd be just who's next. Not that we're satisfied. It's Putin and Hitler parallel each other in that. Every time we said Hitler, here, take this, and that's enough, right? Okay, you bet, we're done. Until 6 months later when Czechoslovakia is swallowed up. Same thing happens here. He's already threatened NATO nations of Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia, the Baltic states. And if he invades those, Joe Biden has said, we will defend every inch of NATO territory. And so that as long as Putin keeps threatening that, there are people in our government that say we got to respond to that by backing down. We can't, because basically we've handed over our foreign policy to him. And Xi Jinping is his quote ally in this. As far as the money goes, some goes straight to Ukraine, of course, for support and whatnot, but the vast bulk of that money is being spent here in the United States. When we give $5 billion in weaponry to Ukraine, we're not buying it on the open market. We're buying it from the military providers here in the United States. There's an old saying that was coined by a political philosopher named Randolph Burns, saying war is the health of the state. And what he meant by that was war is good for the economy. It's good for the government, because they can do things under the idea of war that maybe they couldn't in peacetime. The vast majority of this money is being spent here. And so if people think that, we're just giving them, here's a $5 billion check and you buy whatever you want, I said, no. We're going to give you $5 billion worth of equipment, and it's all American made, friend. Medicine, clothing, food, everything's bought in America. So I think people who think that we're just handing them a big check, the amount of money given directly to the Ukraine for their own discretion is very, very small, less than 10% of what I just told you. It also has led to increased defense spending by NATO, which is a good thing. For years and years, NATO countries relied on the United States, and same with Japan. They just let the United States carry the heavy burden. One of the things, even if you have a great distaste for Mr. Trump, one of the things that Trump did right was that he got the NATO partners to pony up. And now that this war's gone on, Germany and others are a little bit better prepared than they would have been otherwise. Now, I'm not trying to, I'll put it this way. I'm not trying to make Trump's record better than it was, but this was a good idea. But he was right in having them pay their fair share. And now Japan and Germany, two passive nations since World War II, are going to up the ante on their defense spending. And and since they're such big economies, that's not going to be small change. Japan is having a total social revolution, so to speak, about the idea of being involved in military affairs around the world. Same with Germany, and that's a good thing. As far as China, China is what China has always been. A backstage player saying one thing in public, acting another way in private. They are the de facto partner of Russia. This week, Putin met with their number one ambassador in Russia, and then that Chinese ambassador is saying how they're going to strengthen ties and increase their aid and things like that. Now, so far, that Chinese aid, as far as we know, has not been military aid. But once they do that, the EU and America has said that's a red line. And I hope, unlike Mr. Obama's red line is Syria, this red line is actually enforced. But they said if China, you start giving Russia weaponry, that's a red line, and we'll impose sanctions on you. As far as Mr. Biden's trip, well, as you might guess, it was dramatic and all this other stuff. And, he lands on the ground in Kyiv, and apparently it's like you hear the air raid signs going on in the background. They're giving you this impression that there's an air raid going on at that very moment, which is not true. I mean, even CNN reporters on the ground there said they hadn't had an attack or an air raid siren go off in 3 months. And so no big deal. But I'm not going to criticize Mr. Biden for showing up, because he did send a very strong signal to Putin that we're not going to move from our support. And whereas Mr. Putin has not left Moscow, has not visited the front lines, has not been in Ukraine himself in captured territory, he hasn't been into near the fight in any sense of the word, then it was basically Mr. Biden's way of showing Putin up, and it worked. They were furious. And he comes out a couple of days later with this mass-produced video about him meeting with people. Turns out they're all actors, and basically it was all a charade that he was meeting with the soldiers. They were just actors in uniform. He has not met with any soldiers of any kind. He hasn't left Moscow. It really. You see Mr. Biden, and he's wearing those sunglasses, and he's strutting his stuff. But it was a good idea to show that we're not going to be pushed around and intimidated. As far as the political response in Congress, it's mostly been supported, but there are some Republicans like that. Matt Gaetz of Florida. Today, there's an editorial in the Washington Post from George Will, who called the efforts to defund the Ukrainian effort just horrendously political and terrible. He called Matt Gaetz the invincibly ignorant Matt Gaetz, which is a great way of putting it. There was a bill that was submitted by 10 Republicans. Gaetz was a lead signer, that would end all aid to Ukraine. There's also a similar push by Senator Josh Hawley of Missouri, who is another gaseous windsock who just likes to hear himself on TV. They're trying to say we need to decline or decrease our expenditures in Ukraine. Ron DeSantis was misquoted. I think he basically said we need to make sure what we're doing is working, and he comes out of the news as no blank check kind of thing. All DeSantis said was, let's make sure what we're sending them is actually useful, not just throwing money out the window. Okay, I can get that. That's not a problem. But the media reported it as he's opposed to the policy, and he's not. Nikki Haley is who's the other announced Republican, is for it. Trump has said very little about it. So I can't really tell you what he thinks, because he said almost nothing about Ukraine. Anyway, to sum this up, this is kind of a shorter show because I don't want to get too far into all this history and weeds, but to sum this up, whether or not you like Mr. Biden or not, and I think I made my position fairly clear, we shouldn't ever say just because he's not of my party that I'm going to oppose him. That's what I get. All I get from Gaetz and Hawley is this: if had Trump been doing this, it'd have been right there waving the flag, and we got a Ukraine flag tattooed on their face. But since it's a Democrat, they can't support it. Now you say, well, if Trump did it, the Democrats would be raising hell. You're absolutely right, and it's shameful. It's shameful. Many, many years ago, when Harry Truman was president, the head of the Republicans in the Senate was asked, how come he criticized his policy in Korea and also in Central Europe at the end of the war and during the 1940s and 50s. And the Republican senator's name was Arthur Vandenberg, said, politics stops at the water's edge. In other words, when it crosses into the foreign, you back the president. And I believe that to be true. But Gaetz and the rest of them, they're not going to do that because it's a Democrat, Joe Biden, that they would oppose at every turn at everything. And we can't have politics operate like that. It's a shame it does. Also, I would say that there's no way in the world the United States can look itself in the mirror, so to speak, metaphorically speaking, and claim to be the leader of the free world, while a country that we claimed was our ally is rolled under like it is in Ukraine. And the people are being brutalized in a fashion that we haven't seen since the days of the Nazis and Stalin's communists. We can't say that we are the beacon of freedom to the world if we're going to just say, well, it might cost us some money. We got the money. Unfortunately, we think we have too much of it, but this is what the leader of the free world does, is it puts itself on the line. Now, I'm not advocating we send men and women to fight. We don't have to do that. But we need to make sure that the people that are there fighting for these same principles that we uphold are adequately supplied and fed and medically taken care of. We can't say to the world, follow us, and then when some thug, some cretin, some human beast like Putin comes along, we take pass. This is what being the big boy in the block means. So I would hope y'all consider that. I think the majority of Americans, the polls show, support this. That doesn't really, it matters, I guess, a little bit, but it doesn't make it, that isn't my point of making it. My point is, this is what we need to be doing. Is it messy? Will it get us involved? Is there a risk involved? Absolutely. But when are we going to quit hiding under our covers because of bad guys like Vladimir Putin? When are we going to say to people like Vladimir Putin or the North Korean leadership or the Venezuelan leadership or any other country that threatens us, they need to know who they're threatening and that there's going to be a response. So yes, we need to do as much as we can. So does NATO, so does the European Union, so does Japan, which they're all saddling up. Even Germany is sending tanks over there, and they kind of shamed us into doing the same. So United States, if you want to be the big boy in the block, it's time to put on those big boy pants and help a fellow democracy. And I hope you send this to your friends. Why not? I think it's a good show. What the heck? Taylor, you still there with me, buddy?
Yes, sir.
Didn't get the logo I wanted, but I want to reemphasize the expo. Cabrina's, I texted with her earlier. She's like swallowed up trying to get not only her daily duties done, but this expo off the ground. So I said I'd advertise it for her. But the expo, 10 to 3, Saturday at Pathway. It's, you're going to meet, I think they have nearly 80 businesses there. One of the officers, one of the board of directors is a member of my networking group. And he said it's going to be a really, really big deal. So come on by and check out the BNI table. Check out other tables as well. Next Monday, I have Jennifer Woods on the Harvest House. We're going to talk about the Fridge Fund and how far that went. Also, next Thursday, we'll have Cabrina on to talk about how successful the event was. And Tuesday, I may talk about what I mentioned earlier, that DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion nonsense, which is what it is. And so thank you